My family and I were staying at my grandfather's house in Texas for Halloween. In my family, our tradition is to spend the holidays with the oldest person in our family. You know, to make people feel included and happy as possible. Anyways, I was 12 and at the time, I was very skeptical of the supernatural. So, when my grandpa told me about seeing things at night in his backyard, I was laughing inside. Let me clarify here. My grandfather's backyard is this pissy little clearing with a huge forest that touched the back of the yard. This forest was super dense, and people, mostly hunters, would stumble into the yard during hunting season. So, when my grandpa told me about seeing something, I thought to myself, the only thing he is seeing is more hunters. Later that night, my family and I celebrated Halloween, and I went trick-or-treating and probably got one of the best hauls ever. I went straight to bed. The room I was staying in was about 12 feet square, with a huge window facing the backyard. This window was covered by a curtain that had more than a few holes in it. This night, I left the window closed, as well as the curtain. That night, I felt like something was off. When I opened the curtain, what I saw gives me nightmares to this day. When I looked out at the tree line, I saw this thing. It was about 6 feet tall and had its back to me. It was gray-skinned and had a really bad slouch. At first, I thought it was just another hunter. I started to open the window to talk to the thing, and as soon as I did, I regretted it. This monstrosity had glowing pinpricks of light for eyes. I can't explain this. It felt like it was staring right at me, but it couldn't have been. How could it have seen me from way over there? It had horns. Before I could even call to anyone, it disappeared. It moved so fast, it seemed like it vanished. Next morning, I told my family about this. The only people who believed me were my uncle and my grandpa. I learned later that both of them had seen the monster. I'm now 17, and based on what I've dug up, I firmly believe what I saw that night was a goat man. If anybody has another explanation, please do not hesitate to contact me about this.
This happened a few years ago at my parents' house, in a small town in Wayne County. Anyone that knows the area knows some parts are very rural. Well, my parents live right in town, not far from the center of it, but in a weird spot. The town only has maybe 500 people within the limits, and it's surrounded by farmland and forests. They live right near the railroad tracks and a canal, and their backyard is pitch black at night because the streetlights don't reach back there. The yard backs up to a walking trail and woods. It's actually pretty creepy back there after dark, even though it's 2 blocks from downtown. The night this story takes place, it was extremely dark. I think it was at new moon or a moonless night, and it was overcast to boot. Late summer or early fall, so it was pretty dry. No mud to capture any footprints. My parents, brother, and I were talking in the living room at the front of the house, the part of the house facing the town and light. The house is kind of long and skinny, maybe 30 or 40 feet wide, but probably 120 to 150 feet long. As we're talking, the family dog stood up, looked around and started to growl really low. He was a yellow lab about 90 pounds, half deaf and blind from diabetes. There are at least 2 closed doors before you even get to the room where the back door is. The dog is now like full on berserk, barking at the closed door in the hallway. We opened it and followed him to see why he was going nuts. We get to the door in the back room and are now worried someone had broken in, but when we opened it, Marley shot straight to the back door, jumping and barking and snarling, making sounds I've never heard this big baby of a dog make. I opened the back door and he tried to bolt out. He was going to attack whoever or whatever was out there. My parents and I step out on the back porch and close Marley inside. He still sounds almost fucking rabid. We wait for a second for our eyes to adjust because the backyard is pitch black. We see a silhouette maybe 40 or 50 feet away, standing at the edge of the yard right near the railroad tracks access road. Now, to say this thing was big was an understatement. It was way over 6 feet tall, probably closer to 7.5 or 8 feet, and extremely broad. I think it was a potential burglar that we caught sneaking up to the house if it wasn't so fucking massive. My parents to this day swear it was a black bear. Officially, according to the DEC, black bears don't live anywhere near this area, and haven't for a long time. Also, the size of it would have been a record-sized bear. Also, the reaction of my dog going nuts doesn't seem like what a bear would do. After we had put Marley inside, it just stood there, upright, for almost 2 minutes before we decided it was best to go inside. The hairs on the back of our necks were standing straight up. The reason it freaked me out was even at the distance it was at, you could hear it breathing. Deep, raspy breaths. It sounded like it was breathing right next to my ear. They were slow and steady, not like someone who was out of breath. It wasn't like they were trying to make their breath sound loud. It just was. I immediately went to find a flashlight, but when I got back outside, whatever it was gone. No tracks, no fur, just a huge silhouette that was too big to be a person, but acted unlike any wild animal I've ever encountered.
So let me start by saying I'm not a spiritual person. I don't believe in monsters. Well, I didn't until this happened. When I was younger, I would spend lots of times in the wood. My grandfather's property is in the mountains of California. I forgot about this until something else happened. When I was little, maybe 11 or 12, I was up at my grandparents' in front of the house playing with my brother. We were just doing kid stuff, playing with sticks and stuff like that. Suddenly, we heard a cackle coming from a corner from behind a garage. Not a laugh. There was no joy to it at all. It was so hollow-like, the evilest thing I could think of. My brother heard it, so he asked what it was, and I told him just to go inside. He did, and I stupidly started walking towards the noise as I got close to something tall and slender. It ran off into the woods just out of sight. This happened 2 other times when I was younger. Once again with my brother, and once again when I was alone. Fast forward to a few months ago. I'm 17 now, and pretty experienced with hunting and bushcraft. I was up on the property to visit my grandparents. My grandfather was just diagnosed with cancer, and I decided to go for some fresh air. As I walk out, I remember how much I missed the woods around the property. I decided to walk to the densest part of the woods, covered in manzanita. And after about 2 minutes, I'm pretty sure that I'm pretty far from the house at this point, I hear a cackle. The memories come back. A wave of fear rushes over me, and I think to myself, there has to be a reasonable explanation. There are some mountain lions and the occasional bear, but they definitely don't make that cackling noise. I hear a rustle and walk back towards it. I come into a clearing, and that smell hits me, a stink like death. I'm a 6'1" well-built man, and I will admit what I saw made my knees buckle. There was a paw, some sort of canine paw in the middle of a clearing. I bent down and examined it. The fur was still on it, but the arm had been cleaned to the bone. I shivered, and when I arose, I saw it. It is the only thing that I could describe it as. It almost looked human, but its proportions were stretched and distorted. It was hidden behind a tree watching me, and when I saw it run, it just looked so unnatural. It stopped like it wanted me to follow it, but I didn't follow it. I ran back to the house as fast as I could. I could hear it follow a little then stop. When I got back, I sat on the porch and threw up. Since then, I've gone back a few times, and every time, I have seen it. If I walk towards it, it runs but stays just within sight, like it's leading me somewhere. I don't know what to do. I think I may go back out after it though.